Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 3 really important things you need to keep in mind before you play your next round, especially if you're playing at a new course, or maybe you're playing after a little bit of a break. Also, this is my first video, so thanks in advance for watching, and let me know what you think with the like and subscribe buttons or using the comment section down below. Okay, here we go. We have a nice, easy framework for today, keeping in mind what we want to know, why it's important, and how to find it out before we play the next round. And at the end, I've thrown in a little tool to make sure that you remember these things before you head out to play your next round, so stick around for that. Okay, on to the 3 things that'll make your next round better. Number 1, the prevailing wind. Now, pretty much every course has a prevailing wind direction. There might be a few that are super hot, there's not a lot of wind, or there might be other places that have a ton of elevation, so you might get wind at different directions, different places. But generally, most courses have one core wind direction that the wind's going to come from. Knowing this is really important because the wind that you feel at ground level is not the wind that you feel up there. A great example of this is TPC Sawgrass, where they play the Players' Championship. So especially in 2022, there was a ton of wind. We had some pretty rough weather this year. And what you may have noticed if you were watching the play on the 17th hole is the wind down below felt kind of calm, but there were a ton of balls went in the water because there was a ton of chaos up top. And that causes a lot of problems. So these players or caddies who are the experts were still trying to gauge what was happening as the wind came up over the stands. You can see in the image here, there's a bunch of stands set up, and so the wind came up over the stands and they're mixed with the prevailing wind up top to kind of push the balls left and right and miss the green. This applies basically everywhere. This is my local course down the road, and there's a prevailing wind which comes in off the water, which is effectively roughly north. And so as you can see in the image here, there's wind coming right off the water. This means on some holes you're going to be playing into this wind. If you're on one of these holes that are farther down in the image, you're not going to be able to feel that per se, but it's going to be right there on top of the tree. So every time you hit a 7-iron, 6-iron might land, especially on some of the earlier holes when you're hitting into the wind but you don't really feel it, you're going to miss a few yards, probably 5-10 yards short on every shot. And this prevailing wind eventually will make you either hit greens or miss greens if you don't take into account maybe this light headwind that's up top above the trees and you don't really feel it. And in some worst case scenarios, it turns what might be a nice little baby fade into a nice little massive slice because you didn't gauge that left or right wind. So kind of a problem. Fortunately, it's fairly easy to figure out which direction the prevailing wind's coming from. The easiest way, good old pro shop. Not hard to do. When you check in the morning, just ask, hey, what direction does the prevailing wind usually come from? They'll usually be able to tell you. If the folks in the pro shop don't know, it's a little bit harder, but not that bad at all. You just need to take a couple of readings as you go outside and keep an eye out for the first few holes. And that's where tool number 2 comes into play, which is a compass. Now there's lots of different ways you can get a compass. There's one on your phone, there's one on your watch if you have a smartwatch usually, or you can go old school and use an analog compass. I like these. They make you look super legit. Look like you know exactly what you're doing, regardless of what's actually happening, or if you know what direction the wind's coming from, at least you have a compass, and so you look super cool. So to summarize, the 2 ways to figure out what direction the prevailing wind's from: ask someone, and grab a compass and keep an eye out for what's happening on the first few holes to see which way the ball might be moving. Once you figure it out, this should apply for basically the entire round. There might be a few where there's a little bit of a swirl or things are a little different, so something to keep an eye out for. But the first time you're playing a new course, it's really hard to expect that you'll know all of the ins and outs. But maybe something you write down your yardage book for future use. All right, moving on to number 2, green receptivity, also known as will the green hold my approach shots. So why is this important? Well, imagine you're playing the first hole of the day, beautiful drive center of the fairway, you're about to hit this approach shot, pins in the back, you're thinking landed a couple yards short and mosey right up to the pin, tap in for birdie. Great start to the day, about to shoot your career low 58. But you haven't taken into account how hard or not the green is. So you hit this beautiful shot and it ends up landing right next to the pin. And then it keeps going because that green is rock hard. So now you're short-sighted and have a sketchy chip to a downhill pin position. But you're not going to start your day off on the back foot by making bogey here. So there's like probably a 70% chance you try to get cute and hit like a nice little flop that lands right next to the pin, which also means there's probably a 70% chance that you duff that shot. Now you're super worried. You hit your second chip onto the green because it's got to get on. You have a 40-foot putt left. 2 putts later, you're walking to the next hole with a double bogey. 3 shots behind where you dreamt of being 5 minutes ago. But the story doesn't end there, because the next time you play here, you remember this. but maybe it's been a while since you played here last and they made the greens different. Maybe they were a lot more receptive. But you remember that your ball bounced on the green and you made double. So you land at the front of the green, giving yourself lots of room for rollout, and it stops. Now you have a 60-foot putt to that back pin, and there's like a 30% chance you're gonna 3-putt. Not knowing green receptivity is a gift that keeps on giving. So how do we find out whether the greens are sticky or not? Well, simple ways, what we just talked about earlier, asking the pro shop when you check in. You could say something like, do the greens hold approach shots pretty well, or are they pretty hard and the ball tends to roll off? And hopefully you'll get a good answer. The other question that's really good to ask in the pro shop is, are the greens playing similar to the practice putting green you got out here? That's really important because you're gonna have some time on the practice green, hopefully, before you get out to play your round. And you can see what it feels like under your feet. You can notice, do your feet leave imprints, or are your feet basically just kind of walking on this rock hard surface? You can also notice when you drop the balls to putt with, do they make little dents in the ground, or are they rolling off pretty easy? So it's a good way to get a feel. If you don't get a feel, you don't have time to warm up, you don't have time to hit the putting green, you're not sure about exactly how they're gonna be, then for the first few holes, it's a good idea to kind of play a little conservative, maybe play like front third of the green, just in case the greens are super hard and they're likely to roll off. Okay, moving on to number 3. The weather changes. Everyone knows, hopefully, that when the temperature changes, balls tend to go a little bit farther or shorter. Cold equals less distance. When humidity changes, the same thing applies. When it's more humid, the ball doesn't go as far because the air is more dense. Altitude, for sure. That's not really a weather thing, but it's something that affects ball flight. Actually, from a weather perspective, you have to get huge swings in temperature to really have a meaningful difference on the ball. At least for most of us who aren't pros, are calculating everything to the half yard. So do temperature and humidity really matter? Yes. They matter less because of the individual distinctions of how far the ball may or may not go with that extra 5 degrees in temperature, but more about all the clothes and the swing restrictions that we have when the temperature starts to drop. And when you're getting cold, looking at this photo, I immediately just get cold thinking about fall golf. Makes a huge difference in how you're going to swing. The more clothes you're wearing, the more restricted your swing's going to be. The colder it is, the more restricted your swing's going to be. So that 3-yard difference, which is just a temperature thing, now turns into like a 5 or 10-yard difference, and now you're starting to miss greens. So temperature really matters. The other thing to watch out for with the weather forecast is whether the greens are going to dry up or get a little softer, which is going to change your green receptivity, which we just talked about, or even the putting speed of the green. The issue with this is it can cost you shots, because the putts that went 10 feet at the beginning of the day might start going 12 or 13, which turns those tap-ins for par into 4-foot putts for par. And that really changes the entire dynamic of the round when you're having to grind for every shot. Now, this is generally more relevant either in the early or late parts of the day because you have dew coming in or the temperature drops in the morning, afternoon. But it's usually something to keep an eye on every few holes as you go through the round. Looking this up is the easy part. Lots of apps on your phones like Apple Weather or going to the Weather Channel website have great graphs for how the temperature, the humidity, the rainfall, all that stuff is going to change over the course of the day. So you can look those up the night before or the morning of. The harder part is remembering to actually make changes in your yardages or adjustments in your game based on how the weather's changing. The way I like to do this that takes it out of my mind and puts it somewhere else is by using my yardage book. So on every 4th or 5th hole, I've got a little note in there that says temperature adjustment. It makes it super easy for me. It's something I don't really have to think about. And when I'm going through my yardage book, I get that and I go, oh, how have things changed? What's the temperature like? So I do a quick little adjustment every so often, and it helps me stay a little more accurate on how my round goes. So now you're probably thinking, wow, that was super helpful and informative. I should totally keep these in mind the next time I play. But you're gonna go on to the next YouTube video and maybe the one after that, and maybe the one after that, and you're gonna forget all about these until next time you're playing, you're halfway through the round, you're like, man, I forgot to think about green receptivity. I have no idea where the prevailing wind is on this hole. I got you, fam. Here's a quick little page, little summary that you can fill out yourself. Feel free to screenshot this or print it somehow. And you can fill this in before you play your next round. It's super helpful. Thinking deliberately about these things definitely helps, kind of burn them into your memory, and much more easy to remember as you're playing your next round. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and please leave me a comment. This is my first video, so I'd love any feedback. And see you next time.